on, let's get some of the lads together. Let's have a good idea. Okay, you're on. Come on, fellas. Get around the corner. Let's have a good go. Come on, then. You ready? Come on, you lot. Go on, then.
Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Lincoln City are the team, the Radiants is their name. Stinsel is their home ground and football is their game. So come and cheer them on, you lads, support them all the way. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our...
Morning all, how we doing? Not done a dog walk this week, I don't think. Weather's not been ideal for it, to be honest, but it's a beautiful sunny day today. A little frosty still up here. I don't know what it's like in the towns and the cities, but it's a little frosty up here. So I don't normally drop a dog walk on a Friday. It's podcast day. Came out this morning, 6 o'clock. If you haven't listened to it, it's Ben and I today talking about Wickham and Everton under 21s and Cheltenham and Southampton and Mike Garrity and San Diego Loyal, and you know we've got a John Palmer from Gloucestershire Live as well. He's on there, so lots and lots to listen to. But I wrongly stated that the press conferences were on a Friday and therefore we hadn't seen the injury news. I think that these days, with the absence of the Lincolnshire Echo and Radio Lincolnshire wanting the press conference news to come out, in time with their kind of sports bulletins, it means that we probably don't tend to see them as much. If you don't listen to Radio Lincolnshire or you're not on social media following Radio Lincolnshire, it can actually be quite hard to keep up with some of the news. I mean, I subscribe to the audio I follow, so I can get those press conference videos when they go up, but it's there isn't an awful lot written about it. I would like to do more, but obviously having a full-time job as well makes it particularly difficult. So I thought I'd chat a little bit today about a couple of the injuries, because a lot of questions pop up on social media. People will see a post and they'll go, what about Ben House, what about Ted Bishop, what about Lewis Monsma, when either A, the information's in the article and people just don't click on it, which I tend to see quite a bit, or B, the information is not really out there, whether it gets mentioned or not. So it seems weird actually that we feel slightly less accessible these days than we did probably 3 or 4, 5 years ago when we were in League Two in the National League. And I don't know if that's kind of a culture thing. I don't know if that's just the way media's gone. I mean, there's no doubt whatsoever in terms of media coverage. The Echo's kind of withdrawal from proper coverage has left a gap, and it's well known probably that myself and the Echo didn't have a great relationship towards the end, but it's a massive loss, and unfortunately whilst I'd love to cover all the news, it is impossible, but I'll do my best. To the 20 of you watching at the moment, I'll do my best. So tomorrow we go to Cheltenham Town, tough game. They're 2 points behind us in the league, and Mark Kennedy said in his pre-match interview, very similar situations in first-time managers coming out of the 23s, probably doing decent jobs. He didn't say that about himself, but certainly said it about Wade Elliott, and I think it's true. I think one of the differences is Wade Elliott took over a team with a nucleus in place, the likes of Lewis Freeston and Sean Long and Alfie May and players like that, kind of a longer term. So I think Cheltenham, there's similarities between them and from last season to this season, whereas for us, I think there was a degree of a rebuild, maybe not as much as we credit, but certainly a degree of a rebuild. So it's not going to be easy. Now, the first worry obviously was Tuesday night, Everton under 21s. Ben House stretched off, looked painful, lots of worry. He didn't then train on Wednesday, as far as I know. I don't think he'll play tomorrow. Mark Kennedy did say it didn't seem as bad, and he may be in contention. But he didn't really know. For me, when he's being a little bit non-committal like that, I tend to read between the lines a little. I think that it'll be a struggle for Ben to make it. We might see him on the bench, but Tom coming back and playing however many minutes he did on Tuesday is, he's a positive. And let's face it, they're going. Cheltenham will go with Dan and Lunderloo up top. And last season at this stage, if you'd said you can have Dan and Lunderloo or Tom Hopper, we would have said brilliant Tom Hopper. So actually, when losing Ben is a blow, particularly from somebody coming off the bench view. But I also think that in Tom Hopper, we've got a more than adequate League One replacement. Whether Tom Hopper would be the striker to take you to the top 2 or 3 of League One, what he did 2 years ago. Let's not forget that. So, sometimes it's easy to underestimate what you already have in favour of what other people have. So we'll look at Cheltenham and go, oh, I'd like that Alfie May. Whereas actually, has Alfie May ever played in a League One playoff final? Probably not. So, yeah. And if somebody wants to prove me wrong, there, I don't know. I've just said that off the cuff. So I think although Ben's absence is a blow, and were he fully fit, he would almost certainly have been the player that started. I do think that we have an adequate replacement, a more than adequate replacement in club captain Tom Hopper. We will then, it's what we then do on 70 minutes. And again, a player returning from injury who hasn't impressed really, but who I think has the potential to play there is Jordan Garrick. So Garrick coming back, it's kind of gone under the radar. I think when players are injured, there's two types of player that get injured. The ones that you kind of go, no, we can't play. And the ones that you go, oh, for God's sake, he can't play. And Jordan Garrick is probably the former. I mean, he looked brilliant on his debut. He looked just like what we wanted. And I don't think he's really had a good game since. Probably since scoring against Barrow. Certainly struggled. A player who I still think there's plenty to see from. Could certainly play through the middle if we needed to in the final kind of 10-15 minutes of the game, and would offer something a little bit different to Tom. Probably a little bit more mobility, still with the physicality given his rugby league background. So whilst missing Ben will be a blow, I think you have to take the positives. You have to look at it and go, well, actually, he's not out for 6 months. It wasn't as bad as it looked. Normally, if a player disappears on a stretcher, you don't tend to see him 3 weeks later back on the field. And I know that that's a sweeping generalisation, but I think that was the worry. So another injury that we've got some solid news on is Ted Bishop. Now, I think with Ted, there's a misconception that Ted's always injured. Whereas last season, actually, if you look at the number of games he played, he was quite high up. I think he was in the top 5 or 6 for league appearances, and that was an injury hit season. So I think Ted's been a little bit unlucky. I think if you go back to August, Ted Bishop was the first name on the team sheet, absolutely integral. He looked superb, but he's had a pretty torrid time since then. But he really came into his own in August. Now, he's been in and out. We haven't heard an awful lot. For those who haven't heard there's the metal bit on my cap. I'm always doing all the way around there. Bring that back round. For those who haven't heard, Ted Bishop is available for selections for tomorrow. So Ted Bishop likely to be on the bench, given the number of minutes he's had, but almost certain to be, I would say, involved at some point. And I think that's huge, absolutely huge. Because when you consider that Danny Mandrew also likely to be involved, player of the month in October, possibly, might even be November now, but player of the month in one of those months. I get my times mixed up. Scored a couple of goals, looked a real danger. You got Charles Vernon, who I think's done all right since he's come in, a real handful on the wing, can run at you, he's direct. I've mentioned Jordan Garrick, Jack Diamond, and now you're saying we've got Ted Bishop coming back as well. That gives us some wonderful options in and around the number 10, or the number 9 rather. And if Garrick can play the number 9 as well, it just gives us more attacking options. And the other couple of weeks ago, I remember one of the games might have been I think who we've played now and drawn at home. We draw at home with Accrington. And you looked at the bench and it was just, where are the attacking options? Where are the players that are going to come on in the final 20 minutes and change this game for us? I'll still maintain, and I'll maintain it forever now, I guess, because that's how football fans do, that the first half of this season, we've missed the big ugly bastard to come on up top in the last 20 minutes. And we've seen it with teams, Connor Wickham coming on. I think there was a boy that come on at Fleetwood. I keep mentioning it all the time. We've missed that. But that aside, a fully fit Lincoln have got players who can come on in the last 20 minutes and change the game, be that with a turn of pace, a drop of a shoulder, a direct run, that sort of thing, a ball between the lines. We have those players in the squad. We haven't always had those players available. Ted Bishop is one of those players without a doubt. He is a George Grant-esque player. He's got the ability to ping a ball with the outside of his foot through a line. He's got the way that we play it isn't always about pace in the wide areas, by the way. It's about trickery and guile. And I think that we've seen that when we get in close quarters, in those kind of attacking wide areas, we're forming nice triangles. We're looking for little flicks around the corner. We're looking for runs in behind. And Ted Bishop is perfect for that. I think it was a term I first heard last season was soft feet, in that when they've got the ball around their feet, it kind of sticks to them. It's like the old school 8-bit video games, when the ball came and it hit your foot, and then it sticks to you. He's not a twisting, winding player who's going to beat loads, because I think in terms of strength, he can get overpowered. I think in terms of pace, he's not as quick as some, but he's a wonderful football player. And at the beginning of this season, Ted Bishop was one of the starting 11. Now he's almost one of the squad of 16, but he's a massive, massive option. So to have him back is really, really positive. And I just hope that we talk about a busy Christmas period, but actually we're on what at the minute, the 16th. By the time it gets to the 2nd, which is in 2 weeks, we'll have played 4 games, I think. Cheltenham, and we've got Southampton, haven't we? And then we've got Burton, and then we've got Bolton. So it is quite busy. But in terms of the league, 4 league games in 2 weeks potentially around that. I think having as many forwards and attacking players, creative players as possible is huge, really huge. Lewis Monsma, there's no news on him. Of all the injured players, he's one that we want to get back, isn't he? Because he was to be fair, this is maybe again a sweeping generalisation. It's the morning for it. We all love Lewis. The impact that he made at the beginning of the 2021 season was huge. Everyone was winning on him scoring. I think he scored in 6 or 7 games out of 8 or 9, something silly like that. I might be over egging that a little bit. Everyone loves Lewis. And I think his absence through this season has actually not been felt as much as it should have been. And by that, I mean, when you lose a player of Lewis Monsma's potential and quality, it should be something that you talk about week after week after week when he gets back. But actually, the fact that we're now playing, for a start, we're playing 3 at the back, so it should still be felt even more, because, if you're only playing 2 centre-backs, one's injured, you might still have 3 or 4, but look at what we've got. Joe Walsh on the left, Regan Poole on the right, Paddy O'Connor in the middle, Adam Jackson in the middle, Adam Jackson on the right, TJ Ioma on the right. I mean, we've got an embarrassment of riches in the centre-back areas. So we've been able, I think, to sit back and kind of go, well, when's Lewis coming back, rather than, when's Lewis coming back? Because we haven't missed him, but we'll realise what he brings when he comes back. And I hope that makes sense to people. I'm not being detrimental to Lewis Monsma. I'm not questioning what he brings to the side. What I'm saying is that the rest of the squad has more than adequately covered his omission. But when he's back, I think he's perfectly suited to this Mark Kennedy 3 at the back. I can see him playing on the right side of the 3. I was talking to Chris from the podcast about it a couple of weeks ago. Lewis striding out of defence, as Joe Walsh has done in recent weeks, looking to ping that 50-yard ball across to the left. I mean, without having to worry about the fact he's just left a gap behind him, as sometimes we did when in Michael Appleton's reign. It's tasty. It's tasty. And we talk about the first £1 million player. We'll never know who that is, by the way. But we'll never have this player's move for £1 million. Those days are gone. But we talk about players who could go and make us serious money. And Lewis is still one of those players. If he comes and starts pinging the ball out, right side of defence, carrying it forward, getting himself amongst the goals, will not be very long before teams look at him and go, we're having some of that. Because the modern game is very much about 3 at the back. It's very much about ball playing centre halves. It's very much a role, I think, in 2020 that's much more valued than it was in the year 2000, when 4-4-2 and all that sort of thing. But there's no rush, is there, with Lewis? There's no rush. First week of next year, it will be a year. It was Oxford when he first had his injury. I think the first discussions, people were saying he could be out for as long as November. I think that giving him longer to recover is not a bad sign. I don't think there's anything we should worry about. We know he's been on the grass. We know he's been back in training for a while now. I think that there's an element of there's no point in rushing this. He's a huge, huge asset to this football club, and he is a huge asset. So there's no point in rushing this. And we might get to the January transfer window. There's lots of talk about 1 or 2 of our players, Regan Poole in particular. It would leave a question, I think, at right back. But in terms of the right side centre half, if for instance Jackson doesn't play or something like that, Lewis Monsma will then be much better placed to come in and battle for that. So I think that that's a real positive. So that's really the injury news. Forgive me if I have missed anyone. I'm not sure that I have. I think that we're getting into a position now with injuries where it feels like we're coming out the other side. Now, I don't want that to be a tempting fate. Not at all. And I think when I say coming out the other side, I don't talk about this season. I talk about 2 hellish years. I talk about the tail end of Michael Appleton's first season, for full season, 2020-21 season, with Grant and Hopper and Bridcut, Jackson and Walsh, and players going down left, right, and centre, key players, big players. Following season, we never got started with injuries. We never got started. I don't think we could play our full first team on one occasion last season. At the start of this season, it's been bitty. It's been we've had players come back, we've had the odd one go, but slowly but surely the numbers are coming down. I tell you something, you only have to look at other clubs now to see that it isn't just us. Oxford United's manager is Carl Robinson. He's having to defend his transfer policy in fans forums and in the papers. He signed Josh Murphy, who was once an £11 million player. He gave Sam Baldock a new contract, and they've played 5 games between them. There's 3 or 4 others who have been injured for much of the season, and they're talking about when we get our injured players back, they're going to be a better prospect. You look at Blackpool. I mean, Michael Appleton's kind of saying he's never known anything like his injury situation at Blackpool, and there's a lot of Lincoln fans raising eyebrows at that, thinking, well, you don't have to think too far back. It must be absolutely catastrophic at Blackpool, if last season's, if it's worse than last season at Lincoln. So this isn't a Lincoln thing. It's easy sometimes to become insular, isn't it? It's easy to go, we've got these players injured. Why do we always have players injured? There's 91 other teams, and I wager 10 quid that the people that are always complaining about our injury list couldn't tell you what the injury list is like at Blackpool or Oxford or Sunderland at the bit earlier on in the season, who were also struggling. It feels to me, I think, more of a direct consequence of the advances in football. I think that people are less likely to play through the injury barrier. You are less likely to get a Sam Habagam or who was constantly on injections, because they know what it does further down the line now. Poor old Sam was carrying injuries for us for a long while, and he played through the pain barrier to get us promoted, and what did it get him? A long spell on the sidelines, 10 minutes or 10 games at Grimsby, a few games here and there, which is, he deserved better. Not from us, that's not what I'm saying. I mean, from his career, it was normal. I also don't think there's as many players these days that you're willing to not have training. Like, I have on good authority, Bozzy barely ever trained. He just turned up a lot of the time and played games. Not saying he wasn't around the training ground, but training was minimal with him, because you knew that you weren't going to get 5 days training and a game out of him. There's less of that now as well. Particularly, I think, when you've got these young coaches coming through who are, there's when I say there's more of a tactical approach, that sounds wrong, because there's always been tactics in the game. But there's much more awareness of oppositions now. There's much more facility to watch other teams. Perhaps when we dropped out of the Football League 2010, 11 odd years ago now. Can't imagine Steve Tilson watching game after game after game of the opposition, whereas now it's all there. It's on the internet. You sit down, you have a look, you can plan your game plan specifically. You can put set plays in place for certain games. You can put certain passing movements in place just for certain games, not just get tight on X or Y. Look to expose this and that. And so I think there's a lot more analysis, and there's a lot more focus on training during the week for the game, not just training the week for you, if you know what I mean. So I think that's why it's less likely these days that players don't train. It's more likely that if they are injured, they are given that time to recover. And who knows, after COVID as well, players that have had COVID, I don't know about any of you guys, but obviously I've had it. I've struggled in the weeks and even for a month or so afterwards with running and fitness and that sort of thing. I just think that the post-COVID world actually is slightly different, and sometimes we don't understand that quite as much from a fitness perspective. So that's that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Jacob Davenport, if I may. Jacob Davenport, it sounded to me from Mark Kennedy's press conference like Jacob Davenport may not be getting a new contract. Now, again, I might be reading too much into that. He spoke very highly of Jacob, but he also said that players have got to have minutes. He can't have people who have played 50 games and they're 23, 24. Because it's they're not going to be for him. You've got to be available. He said about how much he rated Jacob, liked having him around the place, but there was one moment where he spoke in the past tense, enjoyed working with him or not enjoying working with him, something like that. It just made me wonder if perhaps Jacob might be coming to the end of his short-term deal and not get a new one. Be a real shame. He has been unlucky. I think Sanders and Virtue have made the midfield pairing their own. They've been superb in recent weeks. They have. And it's hard to remember a midfield duo with quite the same impact going back. I'm trying to think, when did Michael O'Connor play with Alex Woodyard, or did Michael O'Connor come to replace Alex Woodyard? In terms of just a midfield two, I think back to even Butcher and Gain. I'm going back a long way now. And Finnegan and Walker actually was a great midfield pair, and we just bypassed them too much. But you're talking next level, these two players. They're both quality. They've both got Premier League academy quality behind them. So it's been hard for Jacob Davenport when he's fit to break into that. We've got Lass to give minutes to. He's our player as well. So it's left Jacob very much the fourth choice holding midfielder or central midfielder. And then when it has come to games he might play in the EFL Trophy, he's been injured. He went off injured against Doncaster. And I specifically went to that game to watch him play. I thought he was excellent that evening. I thought he looked like he had everything that we needed to cover the central midfield area. And then unfortunately he got injured and we've barely seen him since. And that's a real shame, I think. So it will be a shame to see him go, but it won't surprise me at all if he does. Not at all. And again, it may free up budget. And you know what? That was one thing I said about Positive when he signed, was we've only signed him on 6 months. If it doesn't work out, if he doesn't get fit, we're then not committed to his wage being tied up in January, and we can reallocate it to another player or another person. It's that simple. So, whilst I'm disappointed for him, I also think that I can see the benefit in the situation. I've actually just lost my dog. I don't know what he's doing. I've got halfway round his long walk round, and he's now stood, I think, looking at me, wanting me to go back the other way. He's a ball ache like that sometimes. It really is. I'm going to struggle, actually, I think, to go through. Let me just have a look. Oh, that's why my brightness is turned right down. I was going to struggle to go through some of your comments, but I can see them now. So let's go back and have a look at some of your comments and see if perhaps there's a little bit of discussion to come out of that. I am halfway around my walk, so there's no reason to finish up just yet if you're still engaged. If you do have any questions, get them in the comments. I'm happy to answer those from my perspective as much as possible. So first of all, Connor, good morning. Connor's often on board with the dog walk. I appreciate that. Kev Green, always on board. Chilly morning. It is indeed, my friend. It is indeed. Mr. Freestone, how are you? Funny how the San Diego Law shirt looks like our green and yellow Olsen one from many years ago. I've not actually looked at their shirt as much. The San Diego link up. I'll go through the comments and I'll come back and pick up on that in a second. Mr. Rundle, morning, mate. Weather is beautiful for walking the pooch. Yeah, a little bit chilly. I've got fingerless gloves so that I can operate the phone, so that I keep having to swap hands. Sean Simons, morning, my friend. Hope you're well. Mr. Barwise, how you doing, pal? Morning, Gary. Beautiful but nippy out there. What are your thoughts on the San Diego Loyal link-up? Yeah, I'll come back onto that in a second. Sean says, think Bishop is enjoying football more under MK. He looked it. He can't enjoy a lot of it from the treatment table, but it'll be. I think there's a few players. Charlie, what are you doing? 1 minute. What are you doing? That better not be poo. It is. Go on, get on with you, bloody hound. I think there are a few players that are feeling revitalised and re-energised under Mark Kennedy. I think that's obvious. I think you only have to look at Rowan and Sanders, classic examples. Players we were crying out to see last season. At times when we really needed players in their positions, I think that they're obvious examples as well. Bishop, I think, hopefully will be another. Jacob, good morning. Good morning, Jacob. Hope you're well. How are you doing? Happy Christmas to you and your family. Happy Christmas to you and yours, Jacob. I'm doing very well. Thank you, my friend. Steve Barton says that he can't wait to see Lewis back in an imp shirt. I think there's a lot of people that probably feel like that. I think he'll feel a bit like a new signing, but a new signing that you know exactly what you're getting. Jacob, are we doing a Christmas show on your live this year? I'm not sure yet, mate. We were talking about that last night, actually, whether we do a live show, so we shall see. Just going back to Sanders and Virtue, Brian says, I love seeing the partnership between Sanders and Virtue. Sanders is like a player reborn under MK. There we go again. Never got a look in under the Big Apple. There we go again. Like a new signing, really. And obviously Virtue is here by, courtesy of the Big Apple. So I think that is quite ironic. They do look very good together. They're not getting overrun particularly. I really like that. And Sean says, Virtue, great season so far, 100%. David Spencer's on with us. Morning, David. Love the dog walks. Thanks for keeping us entertained throughout the year. It is my pleasure. It gets a little bit quiet and lonely on these dog walks, but instead I get to do them with 40, 50 other people, which is brilliant. So thank you for that. And Ted, yes, Steve Barton is late on board. Ted is fit. Just to recap from the top of the show, Ted Bishop is available for selection tomorrow. Right, San Diego Loyal. Just 1 second. Look how beautiful it is. Honestly, I'm so lucky, but the dog is miles away again. Oh my Lord. So yes, Ben says he's on board as well, catching the tail end today. So as we covered in the podcast, San Diego Loyal, we've had a link up. I've had a little bit more time to kind of look at it. First of all, I made contact with a San Diego podcast last night. So the aim is to try and do a transatlantic pod between the two teams at some point. So we'll give you some more information on that as and when we can. I think it's an interesting link up, and I can see deer over there. 1, 2, 3, probably a little bit too far out for you guys to see. What a beautiful sight in the morning that is. Deers. Anyway, deer. It was interesting because actually Fee this morning in the office asked me about it. She'd heard me recording the podcast last night with Ben, and she said, oh, what's all that about then? And she was asking the kind of questions I think sometimes you need to be asked. Because if you're a Lincoln fan, you go, oh yeah, it's a link up, it's great. Whereas somebody who knows very, very little about football, I'm not talking about Ben, sorry, Ben, somebody who knows very, very little about football will ask more obvious questions that perhaps you don't know the answer to all the time. So she's like, well, what's the point in that then? And it's, without being a negative pointed question, it's a great question, isn't it? We're not going to loan players to San Diego. It's probably not a huge amount of value in that, unless it was our academy players going over there for the experience. They're not going to loan players to us. I don't think it's even that easy to do it across the sea. It's all about commercial opportunity, I think. And let's not forget, it's also about the investment off the field. So San Diego Loyal are smaller than Lincoln, arguably. I think their ground, I said last night, was about 6,000. They play in kind of the step below MLS, but there's no promotional relegation. San Diego is a big city. So what we were effectively doing, it's like tapping into, it's an odd market. It's the wrong way round in America, that they have relatively small clubs in relatively big areas, where we can have relatively big clubs in relatively small areas. So it's almost trying to tap into the area as much as the club, I think. It's trying to tap more perhaps into Landon as well. The Landon is a huge, huge star in America. People of a certain age will know that, but we're talking here about a player who was doing the World Cup coverage on, I think it was ESPN in America. So he's our Gary Lineker, our Roy Keane, our Gary Neville. He's that size, if not bigger, over in America. And now not only is he our strategic advisor, or whatever his official title is, but we're now tied in commercially with the team that he's connected to. It's just a further strengthening of that bond. There's a lot of American soccer fans, and I call it soccer with America, but there's a lot of American soccer fans who want to buy in to the European football culture. So the MLS is basically just soccer, but done as franchises, like the NFL, like the NHL. No promotion and relegation. You know, the Portland Timbers are all well and good, but in 5 years' time, they could be the San Francisco Timbers. It's the way it happens. I think it's maybe as easy in MLS. No promotion and relegation. Finish bottom? Well, whatever. We'll give it another go next season. It's all about the viewers on the television, I think. It's not about building the fan base in the ground. They don't particularly need it as much. You know, there are the odd local derby, but you know, they're state derbies. And when you think state of Texas I think it's bigger than our entire country. You know, it's like saying that Newcastle and Arsenal's a derby. They don't have that rivalry. And there's a lot of American fans want what we have. They want those rivalries. They want that passionate in-ground support. They want things like the 617 in their grounds. But when they're not going to particularly get it, certainly not at MLS, they find their way down into those regional levels. San Diego have derbies with teams close by. And so I think we're trying to tap into that area of the American market, not the corporate kind of MLS thing. We're trying to tap into the real soccer, football of America. We've got Landon on board. We've got American investors with a sort of team that American fans might go, I'll follow those. And if that shifts 1,000 more shirts overseas, or if it shifts, people start coming over here rather to watch the games, it's great, but it also raises our profile over there. So the next time Harvey knocks on one of his friends' doors and said, I'm looking for someone to invest in a football club, and they go, who is it, Lincoln City? It won't be a who, it'll be, oh, the team that San Diego are linked with, the team that we see on the news over here, the team that are kind of got a foothold in this market already. Yes, some people might find that sort of thing it's the nauseating side of football for some people, isn't it? That it's a business, all that sort of thing. They think that Lincoln City fans should be, 8th generation fans, and my granddad went to watch in the first game that was ever played or whatever, stuff like that, or great granddad now. But that's not how football is. And let's face it, I mean, I went on my football trip, Jesus Christ, I'm at it now. I went on my football trip to San Pauli. There's an interest in football. As soon as, I'm a one club man, I support Lincoln City, and a lot of you guys will as well. So we support Lincoln City. But as soon as you cross a border, it's kind of okay to have another club, isn't it? It's kind of okay to go, I like San Pauli in Germany. But you wouldn't go, I like Aston Villa. If not if you're a staunch one club man like I am. So I've got an American club now. Is San Diego loyal? Would it have been San Diego loyal before all of this? Absolutely not. There wouldn't have been any reason for it to be. I'd probably have looked at does anyone play in Lincoln, Nebraska? Or did we have a link up with anybody before? Or did the player that played for us play for somebody else before, like Orlando with Anthony Pulis? But now it's San Diego. And if next time I'm on the internet and I want to buy a football shirt to go running in, I might buy a San Diego shirt. It's quite a nice shirt. And it just strengthens your commercial viability. So I buy into it. I understand it. I'll wholeheartedly embrace it. I don't expect any benefit on the playing side whatsoever, apart from potentially increased revenue. And who knows, one day the loyal might come here for a friendly. One day we might go to America. It's highly unlikely, but you never quite know. You never quite know. Right, so Kev Green, finally, we'll move off San Diego. It's not about injuries, mate, but brilliant to have another home game in the Papa John's Trophy, only 2 games from Wembley. It is that I talk about the Papa John's Trophy a lot because I hate it and love it in equal measure, and that makes it interesting. I don't like us playing under 21 teams, but I can see the benefit to young players in those 21s of playing senior football. Yeah, I don't like us playing under 21 teams, but Everton come, they see our setup, they see some of our young players. Who's to say that doesn't put us a little bit higher up on the potential loan? We've played Everton a few times, borrowed Callum Connolly, didn't we? When we played Arsenal, and again, it was under 21s when we borrowed Tyrese John-Jules and Brook Norton-Cuffy. When you play these teams and they can see what you do firsthand, Man City, Morgan Rogers. I think it's interesting, the potential there. I think that the prize money is phenomenal. Was it 40 grand for beating Everton on 21s? 50 grand, I think, if you were to beat Accrington. Big money. And do you know what? The cup run so far, with the revenues and everything that we've raised, probably, and I'm happy to be shot down, if we lose against Southampton, but we get through to the semi-final and potentially lose that, we may have earned just as much in the Papa John's Trophy as we have in the League Cup. People think, gone to Southampton, get a win there, beat Bristol City, that was brilliant. Might think that that's lucrative. There's no prize money. It's all that half gate money. And there's so many bigger clubs not looking at the League Cup as some of our fans look at the Papa John's as, I'm not going to go to that. Do you know what I mean? It's, for me, those two competitions, in terms of earning potential, are on a parallel. And I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I didn't go to watch Everton. I paid on iFollow, so the club got some money. I'm not turning out to watch a kids team, which is both disrespectful on my part, because I'm then saying how well they did and how much we want respect. But I didn't, and then that's the way it is. But I'll maybe go to the quarter-final now because suddenly we're a game or two from Wembley. Suddenly it's potential for season-changing money, because that's what the Checkatrade Trophy win was, by the way. Yeah, we talk about our training ground and our promotion from League Two, and we talk about the National League and the FA Cup run, but nobody ever actually goes, the Checkatrade Trophy money was vital, and it was vital. That was good money, which allowed us to kick on the next season to have one of the top 3 budgets in League Two. That didn't just come about from investments, by the way. That came about from the Checkatrade Trophy, from the money that we made from that, on the back of things like the FA Cup and the National League. And if we were to get to Wembley and win, let's say, I don't, you know, games to go yet, but you're only 270 minutes away from lifting a trophy at Wembley. If you were to do that and earn a good 6-figure sum to take into next season, and then the budget is, well, we'll give Mark Kennedy an extra 200,000 or something like that, it could mean the difference between the striker that we're missing today or not. And it could, couldn't it? Think about it. I think this Lincoln City team right now, for the first 6 months of the season, has been one player away from being 8 or 9 points better off. And that's a striker. A striker you bring on late on, a striker that covers Tom Hopper while he's injured, a striker that is a bit more of a target man that can hold the ball up a little better, a striker that will just make a difference. And you look at some of the games that we've drawn and could have won. Perhaps if we'd gone 2-0 up or 3-0 up against Fleetwood and been relentless, we might not lose that game. You know, Forest Green, Exeter, we could have scored more in the second half. There's plenty of games where we've been that one player away. So if the difference is just the money from the Checkatrade Trophy final, or the whatever it's called, Papa John's Trophy, between this season and next season, that's the difference it could make. So I get the boycotting. I didn't go to the games, not on principle as such, just because I don't want to watch under 21 teams. But yeah, it's a massive, massive competition for Lincoln City. It really is, especially at this stage now. Especially when you look at the draw, Portsmouth-Bolton, one of those I think goes. Plymouth, the other team, probably you wouldn't want to play. They've still got to get through the AFC Wimbledon game before they play their next round game, which I think is Cheltenham, but I might be wrong. And then you've got Port Vale, you've got Salford, you've got Bristol Rovers. They're teams that Lincoln City, full strength, shouldn't worry about. And believe me, we'll be full strength, looking at or as full strength as we dare be. Because looking at the game the other night, Mark Kennedy didn't treat that any differently, did he? Matty Virtue played, okay, 1 or 2 players came in. Paddy O'Connor played, Regan Poole played. I mean, Sean Rowan is as good as first 11 anyway. Rowan and Robson are going to fight for that position, played. So we'll take Accrington seriously, and I'll be honest, from what I've seen of Accrington over the last couple of seasons, last season and this season, it is a game that's winnable if you approach it in the right way, you have the right setup, and you kind of get at them just as Morecambe was. And I know Morecambe, we only got to on penalties. But there we go. Right, well, look, thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody watching again. It's been a pleasurable walk. I don't know if you can see that. If you look out right out there, is it easier if I do it that way? There we go. So if you look right out there, actually that's the sea. So Skegness, Mablethorpe out there. Oh, dear me. There we go. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you listening. Just a word, those of you who are listening to the podcast will be aware that we are moving over to TalkSport Fan Network. Shouldn't mean any fundamental differences, but what it may mean is that if I do a dog walk over kind of 30 minutes, I'll be putting it out as a podcast rather than leaving it as well as YouTube, putting it out as a podcast as well. There'll be a TalkSport advert of some description dropped in the middle there. But again, I just think if we put more content out, we can raise a bit more money and hopefully sponsor a player. It might be difficult to sponsor a first team player given the cost, but there isn't any reason why we might not sponsor a youth team player or two. We'll see what money comes in. So yeah, please do, if you get the opportunity, once we're on the podcast, once we're on the TalkSport network, have a listen on there as well. If you come in late, like Mr. Barton did, or if you miss some injuries. So Steve Jollins, happy Christmas. Yeah, happy Christmas to everybody. I'll talk to you all before then. I'll do a dog walk next week. We'll do a podcast of some description next week. So I'll get an opportunity to talk at you all again before Christmas. So thank you very much. Have a great Friday, a great weekend. Safe travels if you go into Cheltenham, even safer travels if you go into Southampton. Yeah, good one. Up the M's.